theory is going to be the final unit of our level 2 of One Academy, and we are going to deal with the most complicated case in decision making. Game theory deals with the situation where we have to make decision in accordance to somebody else's decision. So we have a situation where we depend on somebody else. This somebody else might be our competition or it might be our partner, and in any case we have to decide what to do, taking into account his or her actions. So game theory is the study of strategic decision making. Specifically, it is the study of mathematical models of conflict and cooperation between intelligent, rational decision makers. An alternative term suggested as a more descriptive name for the discipline is interactive decision theory. Game theory is mainly used in economics, political science and psychology, as well as logic, computer science and biology. To be fully defined, a game must specify the following elements using payoff matrices. First, the players of the games. Second, the information available to each player at each decision point. Third, the action available to each player at each decision point. And fourth, the payoffs for each outcome. Before continuing, we must review what is the difference between payoff matrix and a decision matrix. Decision matrix is something that we already know from the normative reasoning decision approach. It basically consists of alternative of the decision maker and the states of nature which are not controllable by the decision maker, and each combination of these has one single outcome, and this is the outcome for the decision maker. The payoff matrix used in the game theory actually is a bit different. Each cell actually consists of two numbers, two outcomes. One of the outcomes is for the decision maker A, and the other is for the decision maker B. I would like to remind you that when we speak about game theory, we have at least two parties, maybe cooperative, maybe competing, and from the point of view of the decision maker A, decision maker B is somebody that he cannot control, and it could be looked as some sort of a state of nature. Although his actions would rely on what decision maker B is thinking about the possible behavior of decision maker A. So it becomes very quickly very complicated. This is why the normative reasoning decision approach is a tad more easier because there are two players, but one of them is the so-called super player. The environment, the states of the environment represent the super player, and he or she does not have any interest in any desired outcomes. So it is a simpler version. So when we have a payoff matrix in the game theory, for example, here we have two companies, one of them is competing with the other, and for each cell we have two different outcomes. And the outcome, for example, if firm A decides on low price and firm B decides on low price as well, then both companies end up with having an outcome of 10, because this is the decision maker. So these are the difference here. There are some similarity, there are some differences. Bottom line is that the payoff matrix is actually a lot more complex tool because it has more information. I would like to explain, the easiest way to explain game theory is to show you a very popular case, the so-called prisoner's dilemma. In prisoner's dilemma, we have a very short story, but at the same time a bit realistic. We have two criminals caught for a minor crime, let's say misdemeanor. And these two criminals have actually committed a bigger crime before that, and the police knows that they have done it, but they don't have any proof. So what the police are doing is what the police are doing anywhere in the world, by the way, is separate these both criminals in different rooms and speak to them separately and give to each of them a very easy choice. If you confess and tell on the other criminal, so betray your partner, then you will be given a lighter sentence. And here it is, and if you remain silent, you will be given a harder sentence. So what we have here is we have a 4 different situations. Let's say prisoner A and prisoner B. If prisoner A remains silent, so doesn't tell anyone about the bigger crime, and prisoner B remains silent, so doesn't tell anyone about the bigger crime, both of them stay cooperative and go in prison for the minor crime. They end up in prison, but both of them being cooperative to each other, decided to not betray their partner, they would stay for the minor crime in prison. Okay? The other case is that, for example, prisoner A decides to remain silent, but prisoner B decides to confess. Well, in this case, prisoner B is given an immunity and he walks free, so 0 year in prison, and prisoner A goes to the jail for the bigger crime. And it is the same thing is vice versa here. If prisoner A confesses and prisoner B doesn't remain silent, and if both of them confess, so both of them speak, since both of them were cooperative to the police, they have confessed, both of them get a reduced sentence for the bigger crime. So basically they would get, for example, 5 years. And now we are in a situation, a typical game theory situation, where the decision maker is dependent on whatever the other decision maker is deciding, and both outcomes are interrelevant. They are interconnected. I'm just going to show you the easy way to solve this situation. And solving in this case, this is basically called a game, a situation where there are interactive decision makers. And in this, solving this game basically means to find out which outcomes, so which square would rationally be achieved. So I would like to remind you that when we speak about this game theory, we're speaking totally about a rational decision making. So what we would do, of course, there are many more complex and more sophisticated decision rules, but we're not going to show them here. They are outside of this current course. No, so if I'm prisoner A and I'm looking into the possibilities, should I confess or should I remain silent? I know what the other the other criminal has in mind. He has basically the same options as me, confess or remain silent. More or less, I know what are the outcomes in every case, and what should I think about right now is what would I do if I know that the other has done one or another thing. So I'm prisoner A. I'm looking into the prisoner B choices, and I see that if if I decide to remain silent, in this case, there are two possible outcomes for prisoner B. If he remains silent, he gets 1 year of jail. If he confesses, he gets zero years in jail. So if I remain silent, he has an obvious choice. He would have to confess. And on the other hand, if I decide to confess, I'm looking into the options of the other prisoners. He has, if I decide to confess, he has the option to go to 20 years or the option to go 5 years in jail. And again, there is one situation much better than the other, and it is against to confess. So it turned out that rationally, no matter what I decide, from the point of view of my compatriot or my partner or competitor, it doesn't really matter in this case anymore, from whatever I choose, he always has one option better than the other, and in both cases it is to confess. So right now, at this very moment, I know that he is going to confess me, and he is going to betray me. Now that I know this, so he's going to confess me for sure, to betray me for sure. So now that I know this, which is better for me, to stay for 20 years in jail or to stay 5 years in jail? Obviously, the second one. So in this case, even without speaking with each other, it is always better, of course, given this particular situation, it is always better to confess and to betray your partner in crime. And what happens at the end is that rationally, without knowing whatever the other has said, if we are doing it rationally, we're always going to end up with one stable solution, which is, in this case, going to jail for the lesser sentence, 5 years and 5 years. And by the way, if you think about it, in reality, this is why all the police around the world are having the same policy towards partners, criminals. Anyway, the point here is that we have a totally rational way to decide which should be our behavior, which alternative should we use, knowing what are the opportunities and the alternatives of the others, and knowing that the other is always a rational thinking person. So now we can somewhat review some main concepts. So first of all, what is a strategy? It is the way each player chooses his/her action each turn. Second of all, pure strategy is when the player chooses the same action every turn. It doesn't matter what is the situation. If it is a consecutive game, he or she chooses the same action every time. Mixed strategy is the player chooses different action every turn. When using mixed strategy, the probability for choosing any given action could be set and could be computed a priori. So basically this means that even if I know that the other person is not playing with a pure strategy, the same thing every time, I could in advance, a priori, compute what are the odds, what are the probabilities of him or her doing this or that. Furthermore, the fundamental principles of game theory. Each player chooses rationally the best possible winning strategy while assuming that the other players do the same. Main assumption of the game theory when analyzing a game, which means when analyzing a problem situation, there are two main assumptions. First of all, each player decides entirely rationally, considering only the available information on benefits and or costs. Basically, this means that any emotional ties and any other non-rational arguments are forgotten, and only rational, calculative factors are considered. And second assumption is that each player knows that the opponents decide entirely rationally, considering only the available information on benefits and on costs. Which means that not only that I decide entirely rationally, but I know that all the others are acting entirely rationally. And finally, I would like to explain some typical types or classes of games. And once you understand, once you hear this explanation, you understand how wide and how various this theory is. First of all, there is the so-called distinction between cooperative and non-cooperative games. And some games are totally non-cooperative. For example, the prisoner dilemma that I have just showed you is totally non-cooperative game, where stable solution is always non-cooperative. A game is cooperative if the players are able to form binding commitments. In non-cooperative games, this is not possible. Often it is assumed that communication among players is allowed in cooperative games, but not in non-cooperative games. Hybrid games contain cooperative and non-cooperative elements. So, for example, if we're speaking about games in a sense of decision-making situation, but at the same time as a game, for example, a board game, because every board game is a decision-making situation. For example, a chess or backgammon is a non-cooperative. Cooperative situation would be if we are partners in a business. If we're partners in a business, each of us have our own interests, our own ideas, but if we're having a successful partnership, of course, we are interested in both of us doing well. Next distinction is between symmetric and asymmetric games. A symmetric game is a game where the payoffs for playing a particular strategy are the same for each player. And this is self-explained. Next distinction is the so-called zero-sum game and non-zero-sum game. It is a very important distinction. In zero-sum games, the total benefit to all players in the game for every combination of strategy always adds to zero. More informally, this means that the player benefits only at the equal expense of the others. So if somebody is winning, somebody else is losing. A typical example of a zero-sum game is the world financial market. There is the notion there that if somebody is winning somewhere around the world, somebody is losing equal amount. Basically not one-to-one, but if somebody is winning, the market as a whole is losing the same amount. So we go further on. The next distinction is simultaneous and sequential games. Simultaneous games are games where both players move simultaneously, while sequential games are ones where later players have some knowledge about earlier actions. If we imagine a game of chess, it is a sequential game. Everyone makes their move, and then the opponents have their turn. So at the moment where it is the opponent's turn, the opponent not only knows the payoffs, not only knows all the alternatives, not only knows all this and that, but he or she also knows what is your turn that you have already made. Next distinction is games with complete information and games with incomplete information. Complete information requires that every player know the strategies and payoffs available to the other players. Furthermore, if all players know the moves previously made by all other players, as in sequential games, the game is one of perfect information. Combinational games, games in which the difficulty of finding an optimal strategy stems from the multiplicity of possible moves, are called combinatorial games. A combinatorial game would be, if we look at the types that we have covered so far, and a typical combinatorial game would be a non-cooperative, asymmetric, zero-sum, simultaneous, incomplete information game. If I just have mentioned the typical business situation, the most complex business situation that everyone is in the business is within it, or every investor is living in this situation. So basically, this would conclude our very brief introduction to game theory. There are plenty of more things to be said here, but for the sake of our level of understanding, it is more than enough. I would like to remind you that it is one level more complex than the normative reasoning decision approach because it includes somebody else as a decision maker. So somebody who might think what we could do and we can think what he or she could do and so on and so forth. So it quickly becomes very complex. The easy way is to solve this situation is to make analysis on the decision and the outcomes and rationally think about everything. So this concludes our second level of One Academy, which was on decision making and risk. In this level, we have covered the important issues of risk and risk management. We already know what risk consists of and how it is developed as a concept along the history of the civilization. It is an important thing to understand that risk always has two sides. One side includes the negative outcomes and one side includes the positive outcomes. Okay, then we understood why risk management is important and what are the approaches to risk management in a more general sense. Next, what we covered is the quantitative aspects of risk and risk analysis. We now know that there are three widely used tools for quantitative risk analysis. First of all, this is the expected value, which is, as you have seen, widely used after that. Expected value, which uses probability and the estimation of outcomes. Second is the so-called decision tree, which is a graphical representation of risky situation. Third is the probability distribution, which is has a wide application across science, but as well as wide application in decision making. Then we made some comments on the psychological aspects of risk, and what we found out that the classical theory is not always correct, especially when we are put into a losing proposition, and in losing proposition we are more likely to take risks, whereas in winning proposition we are more likely to avoid risks. And then we talked about the normative reasoning decision approach, and in general we talked about the process of decision making. One important issue here is that we always have to have alternatives, otherwise we don't have anything to decide. We always have to know something about the environment, at least states of the nature of the environment. We might know, and we need to know, what are the outcomes of each combination of state of nature of the environment and alternatives that we might choose. Then we need to know the level of information of the decision maker, and then we need to choose a criterion for decision making in the given situation. And there are basically at least 7 possible criteria which we have covered. Finally, we've spoken a little bit about the game theory, which is a bit complex way to analyze decision making in the situation when we rely and we depend on somebody else's decision at the same time. It was nice doing this course with you. See you in the next course, and have a nice day and be successful.